And we have returned. You're listening to CSC Talk Radio. This is Beth Ann. And as I promised earlier in the show, we're going to have Roger Simmermaker, and he is here with us now. Roger, how are you doing?
I'm great, Beth Ann. How are you? Good to be back on your show.
I know it's been a long time. I'm going to give a little history if I possibly can. I don't know how far back. Most of my listeners go back all the way with Derry Brownfield when I worked for him years and years ago. And Roger was on several times at that time when he wrote the book, How Americans Can Buy American. And, of course, we've been pushing the book that you wrote here just a few years ago, My Company, 'Tis of Thee. And he's working on a new book. It's not available yet, but he's working on a new book. And it's, what is the title of it? Do you have the title yet?
Yeah, the title is Unconstitutional. Our founding fathers rejected free trade, and so should we.
No wonder I couldn't remember it. But
it's a long subtitle, but the unconstitutional is the real hook in it.
Okay, and Roger joined us on Friday because Roger has a job during the week, so he has to kind of manipulate when he could be here with us. And I told him, that my listeners would give up their free for all Friday, but we're going to give the phone number so they can call and ask questions. 877-895-5410 is the number to call. So you've been doing a lot of research on the tariffs and the taxes and free trade and all this and that, and I know that it has been your passion, your drive, your mission to help these companies that are made in America, to help Americans realize how important it is that we have our own industries, that we manufacture here at home. That doesn't mean we can't purchase some things from abroad, but we need to be dependent. We need to be able to have our own jobs. And I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about that and what this new book's going to be.
Well, as you mentioned, I've previously written about buying American, but you can't really talk about buying American unless you talk about imports and exports, and you get into the trade and tariffs. And especially with, our current president being elected, and he's put such an emphasis on tariffs, that's why I wanted to write this book now, because it's, you got to strike when the iron's hot kind of a thing. But, free trade and the many reasons and arguments you can make, but it's actually just unconstitutional because our founding fathers, they were all protectionists. They're in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, there's no mention of free trade or free markets anywhere. And that's because free trade was never intended to be a guiding trade policy for the United States. Bill that George Washington signed after he signed for the seal of the presidency of the United States was a bill on various tariffs on imports. So people talk about tariffs and we can't do that, we shouldn't do that, why are we doing it? Well, we've always done that, and it's how our country was founded. And like I said, the founders were against free trade. They were for tariffs. And some people that are mouthing off about how we need to go back to free trade and we shouldn't have tariffs at all simply don't know our U.S. trade history at all.
Oh, no, they don't. And I'm going to lump myself in some of that. I mean, I've always thought that tariffs was a good idea, and I know that there was some of that, when we got in, and I don't want to talk about the Civil War necessarily, but when we got into the Civil War, before it became about certain things, it was a little bit about the trade and the tariffs and the things that were going on down in the South.
Well, it's interesting you brought up the Civil War because right at that time we had no income tax. Yes. And everything actually up until including the salary for President Abraham Lincoln was funded completely on tariffs. And, we decided to have an income tax because we thought, well, we want to try to penetrate export markets, and maybe we need to lower our tariffs a little bit, maybe lower our revenue at the same time. But I think what's missing from the trade debate today is people don't realize that a tariff is an indirect tax. The company can either pass it on to the consumer or not, whether, they're making enough money, and we just had the big tax cut. So, companies are making more profits now than ever, so they can afford to use that or swallow some of that as a cost of doing business. It's better than a direct tax. If we could have more revenue from tariffs, we could lower taxes on the American people and businesses as well, and get back to the way the country was founded, the way it used to be, and have the importer fund it. Don't tax us directly. Have the importer pay a tariff or a tax when they import their good at the border.
They just act like the president is the bad guy in all this. And, he wanted to redo. We all know that NAFTA and CAFTA and GATT and all those, they have not worked. Not for the people, not for America. And, we did hear that sucking sound as the jobs left. And we have this issue, too. And I don't know if you hit on any of this or not in your book, your new book, but when Donald Trump started his campaign to be president, and his main topics were trade and immigration. And I don't know how you feel about this, Roger, but it came to me, my listeners are probably rolling their eyes around because I've told this story so many times now, but it came to me one evening. I was trying to figure out, why do they hate this man so much? I mean, this is a guy, every one of them, on both sides of the aisle, at one time or another, probably gone to him for money for their campaigns. But now they all hate him. And it was like somebody hit me in the head. It's because of trade and immigration. Why does Congress behave the way they do about our, borders and about immigration and about trade? Why do they behave? Because it works hand in hand with them, and they're making money. But the American people are losing jobs. And it came to me, I don't know the specifics, but I just know that that's the reason for the hate of him, and that's why they can't have him in there. He's kind of messing up the little gig they got going.
Well, some people act like, America's trade history only goes back 70 years, and they talk about how the Republican Party is supposed to be traditionally a free trade party. But as you know, Abraham Lincoln was the father of the Republican Party, and he said we should trade where it is necessary and discontinue it where it is not. In other words, if we make something here, we don't need to import it. So his is more of, it actually kind of borders on isolationism, actually.
Yeah.
If you want to think of it in modern day terms. And of course, I doubt if Abraham Lincoln was sitting here or was in the White House or the negotiating table, they'd be laughing at him, calling all kinds of names.
Oh, they might
be doing that because that's Abraham Lincoln, right? So, so things have kind of switched. The Republicans are becoming more protectionist now, just like they were when they started. If you think back to some of the Republicans, besides, Abraham Lincoln talked about how free trade would lead to ruin. Teddy Roosevelt famously said, "Thank God I'm not a free trader." It's just wonderful quotes of people, Republicans that said those kinds of things. And then if you look on the other side of the coin, Karl Marx was talking about he was for free trade because he said it would hasten the social revolution. So
Bingo.
Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln, or do you want to be on the side of Karl Marx? It's really kind of a choice because they're opposing views on trade.
They are. And
it's kind of abrupt to say that, but that's really where it is.
You hit all this in your new book? You hit all this with the history and such in your new book?
Oh, absolutely. And I tie it in with my modern day arguments about trade. And, it's just, if you're free trade, basically today they're talking about, don't put tariffs on imports because that'll make things cost more, and I don't want my product cost more. I want things to be cheaper. Well, if you want products to be cheaper, then you have to be against things like equal pay for women, because if we paid women as much as men, then women would be making more money, and therefore the costs would go up for the things that women contribute to the products that we buy. So you'd have to be against that. You would have to be against the Fed, whether you agree with the Fed or not, their target 2% interest rate. Inflation every year. You would have to be against that because inflation causes things to cost more. And actually what you need to do is, if you're worried about inflation and at the same time you're worried about tariffs increasing prices, then all you need to do is, if tariffs do increase prices a little bit, you just back off on 50 basis points or 25 basis points of the Fed, and you just don't raise rates as often.
Okay, we're going
to work beautifully together.
We're going into a break. You're getting on a good roll here. I would also say inflation is also a hidden tax. People just don't recognize it because it's manipulated by the Fed. You're listening to CSE Talk Radio. We're visiting today with Roger Simmermaker. We're talking about tariffs and trade and jobs in America. 877-895-5410 and Roger and Beth Ann. We're going to be right back.